I'm Tom Virgin. I'm the proprietor of Extra Virgin Press. I got a grant from the Knight Foundation in 2015 to preserve the art of letterpress in Miami and to teach people in Miami how to use it. I've been here in Little Haiti since 2017, but up until now, a month ago, I was a full-time teacher in Title I public schools. Now I'm printing full-time, and the work that I'm doing is working with artists, working with writers, working with kids, working with community people, institutions, museums, book fair, and everybody's closed. So it's been a different time for me while COVID has been in the world. But fortunately for me, I was able to stay here and print. So as someone who's a printer, I have a responsibility to make things for the community. I make things for me, and I print prints because I'm a printmaker, but after 25 years of teaching, I also am trying to teach people how to find their own voice. And there's been many voices that I've printed for. Recently, I found it absolutely necessary to print vote posters to put out into the community, not necessarily for any one party. I wanted people to vote. I still have been around kids quite a bit, and I feel like it's important for them to have a voice in their world. So I made these prints, and I made them for an organization called theamalgamated.org. It's based in Colorado, and they have a bunch of independent printers that send in all kinds of prints about voting, and they distributed them around the country to areas that were very important for the election. So my print went out to Colorado, and from there they sent it all over the place. They were free downloads for whoever wanted to use them. This is some of the other prints that came into Colorado, and these came from small print shops all around the country. Some of them are educators, some of them are printmakers, some of them have been printing for their whole life. The guy who is the one who collected all the prints has been doing this for a good part of his life. Amos Kennedy, who's been a longtime mentor for me, is the one that suggested that I make a vote poster and send it out there. The prints below in the frames are the Holmes portfolio. The Holmes portfolio is the first portfolio that I did as Extra Virgin Press, and I worked with my friends who are visual artists and some poets, and this particular portfolio was just picked up in COVID by the Miami International Airport with funds that they got for people who were affected by COVID, and that will be up in the airport. These are other prints that I made. These are Miami 100s. These will be on the book fair website during the virtual book fair. This is Campbell McGrath and Michael Heddick, and the one on the bottom is Michael Heddick, and it's a group of prints that I made together. That's a long poem he did, and I made this while I was in a residency in Red Wing, Minnesota. Along with doing everything else for everyone else, these three prints are prints that I made more or less for me, but each one of them is significant in that it's a print that's my neighborhood. The one on the right is a house that's around the corner from me. It's a shotgun house, and I printed that image and put it on a poster for the book fair, for the porch last year, but I also printed a few just with the image, and I brought one to the lady who lives there. The one in the middle is the outside of my shop. I knew I was having visitors from Young Arts. A bunch of kids who are some of the best artists in the United States came to visit me, and I printed a whole pile of those and gave everybody one. And the one on the left is the view looking down 59th Street out from my shop. These works here are Amos Kennedy. The big poster on top is my graduation certificate. He and I did a big project together that was affected by COVID in that we have to wait to get together and print with the public. So that project will come out when Amos can come and visit. But he sent me these prints right here because they were just in the New York Times, and it was something that came out right before the election, and it's a wonderful article that someone wrote about voting for people of color, but Amos made posters of this thing, and they're reproduced in the New York Times. As I said earlier, I taught for 25 years. I taught in Hialeah for 12 years. I taught at Miami Beach Senior High for about the same amount of time. And this image up here is the testing calendar from 2014 and 2015. As a teacher, I'm very fond of teaching, but I'm not crazy about testing. I don't mind testing. I always taught until they told me, no, you have to use our tests, not yours. And as a visual arts teacher who teaches kids vocational things as well as things that have to do with aesthetics, I thought it was very important that they have a lot of time to learn all the different things that came with being professional. This is made out of punch cards, basically Scantron cards, beeswax, Japanese paper. The orange fish are the happy fish. Those are the days there's no tests. The black fish are the sad fish. Those are days there's testing. The days that are blocked out, where they're all black, are the days when there's no school. The first thing they threw away during COVID was testing. And I think this would be a real good time to put some of that money back towards the kids. The Raise Your Voice project will end up being 2,500 prints that fill a room, hopefully in Little Haiti Cultural Center. It was originally designed to collect voices from the community. Sadly, about the same time that everyone went into quarantine, but many of the voices came in prior to that. There's 4 languages there. I have Spanish, Creole, English, and French. There's stuff from literary sources. There's stuff from poets. There's things there that my mom used to tell me. There's things that came up during COVID that are printed underneath the words. I started printing this stuff in January and December, and there's about 4 or 5 layers of color on each one of these prints. Some of the words in the background are benign. They're things that I use to fill space. Zip codes, area codes, things that tied them to this community. But as time went by, I kind of couldn't ignore COVID, quarantine, the conversations that happened around this. And I ended up putting in artwork that I made, artwork from students, artwork from artists, artwork from friends, and all these create this one voice that came together while we were all kind of doing the same thing at the same time. So I love working with poets. Writers for me are the anchor that hold me to this planet. I've been a bookworm my whole life. Being a bookworm brought me to art, brought me to making art, taught me how to make books. The books on the table are books that I made. The first book that I ever made is Escape, and a friend of mine said, Tom, do you want to make a book? There's a book show. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And this book that was supposed to be 1 book ended up being 3 books. And I bound it in my blue jeans. So everything here was kind of near and dear to me. This little book is my most recent book. And this book has words by John Dufresne, who I've collaborated with several times. And it's handmade, and it uses John's words and my images. And the images come from the neighborhood where I live, where I drive. And the stories that John wrote go emotionally and literarily from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I'll be making more books like this. This is very close to where I live in Coconut Grove. That's in front of the Playhouse. And this book here is my first Fine Press edition. And I made this book with 5 other people. It's hardbound, handmade. I was a resident artist at the Jaffe Center for Book Arts. Arthur Jaffe is kind of my adopted grandfather. He bought my first book that I made and said, "Tom, you're good at this, you should make more books." I was the Salzburg resident artist one year, and I was fortunate to be able to use the Jaffe Center as my landing place and print this entirely at the Jaffe Center. I worked with Yadi Peralta, Carrie Snyder, Laura Tan, John Dufresne, and Michael Heddick. And everybody got some books, and the rest of the books will go into collections and places that collect fine print. These are things that have ideas that are contemporary, that are part of a conversation that everybody's in. While I am away from home at my other home, which is Red Wing, Minnesota, I've been to a residency there 7 times at the Anderson Center. Pride of the Roots, the old familiar dark, to the sweet smell of peat and swamp water, was written by Robert Hedin, the retired director of the Anderson Center. That's another one of the Midwest 100s. There's a lot of lines that tie all these things together, because when I work with somebody, I like working with them over and over. And Robert invited me back after my first trip to the Anderson Center. And most of this stuff here is directly related. And it's like tucked in the corner behind my chair, because I want all this stuff close to me. The Little Squirrel was done by Mary Bruno. Mary Bruno is a printmaker who lives north of the cities in Minnesota. She's the one who gave me the reduction print class that resulted in my most recent reduction print. The "We love you, don't cry," those words came from Louise Erdrich. She's a Native American writer, a National Book Award winner, and an incredible woman who has a bookstore across the street from elementary school. She has been writing pretty much as long as I've been printing. She's amazing. My Mighty Journey is a book that is a children's book that came from a man named Gaylord Shenlick, another one of my many mentors. Gaylord is the most masterful printer I've ever seen. This book started with a year-long walk up and down the Mississippi River. Gaylord and John Coy, the guy who wrote the words that go with the story, worked with the Minnesota Historical Foundation, and they printed objects out of the river. And the actual book is as big as this table. The book that's the children's book that was repurposed was put together by Gaylord's quarterback, Paul Nylander, who's another printer who's in this row of prints from the Midwest. Longevity is by Adler Guerrier and Kathleen Hudspeth. Mary Bruno did RGB. Praise It All is another Louise Erdrich print. This came from her flower garden that she put right across the street from her bookstore, in between her and the elementary school. And the poem is actually etched into the rocks that are inside the flower garden. Passion is for a portfolio that Robert commissioned along with me to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Anderson Center. And the little watercolor is going to be part of the next book that I work on, although it may not be the same colors. So all these things are very dear to me. These are all people who I see over and over. I reach out to them. I have a community in Minnesota. I have a community in Miami. I have a community on the beach. I have a community in Hialeah. The Hialeah Art Mafia is a very powerful group. The kids that I taught 10, 15, 20 years ago, many of them stay in touch. Several of them are artists now. And actually, that part of this job of being a teacher is the best part, because my students are now teaching me.